Okay. So today we have two faculties just for the 14th Zoom meeting. So this meeting is basically an MIS surgical technique, and it has been split up into two parts. One is percutaneous fixations of spine, that is basically the pedicle fixation. And the second part will be MIS TLIF, that is basically a tubular TLIF, which we'll be discussing. And the first presenter is Dr. Anup. He is a neurosurgeon from Amrita Institute of Medical Science. And Dr. Vignesh will be joining for second half of the presentation from MIS TLIF from Chennai. So I welcome Dr. Anup to present about his talk in percutaneous pedicle fixation of spine. Take over, sir, from me. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ramachandran. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Please
so, good evening to all. It has been a nice initiative by Ramachandran. So, it is, I understand that it is 14th of the Zoom meeting that is going on. I think it's a splendid effort from his side. He has been tracking, he has been keeping, good topics, nice presenters. So, I'll go ahead with the topic that is a percutaneous fixation of the spine. So as we all know, the pedicle screws are established as the standard in spinal fusion in over the past decade or so. The reason is that it engages all the three columns of the spine, and pedicle screws are able to resist movement in all the planes of movement. It has got a superior pull-out strength, higher corrective forces can be applied. So that's why the reason that pedicle screws has become a sort of standard. And nowadays, we don't require anything else for a majority of the cases. But as we do cases, we understand that the open pedicle screw fixation is not without the problems also. It requires an extensive tissue dissection. Why? Because the entry points of the pedicle screws, we visualize and we expose from, there is a lateral to medial trajectory is involved. So we have to go lateral. And it requires extensive tissue dissection and lengthier incision to expose the entry points at each level. And for the optimum hold, you have to have the lateral to medial trajectory. That also requires you start laterally and come medially. So that also means that there is extensive tissue loss, and there is much more, the patients take much more time to recover. It is associated with lengthy hospital stays and as a result, significant cost also. So percutaneous pedicle screw fixation eliminates all these, that there is no need for a large midline incision or a very large paraspinal muscle dissection. So all the percutaneous screws and the precondylar rods are placed through stab incisions, and the muscles are bluntly split rather than divided. So it preserves the nerve supply of the muscles also. And this helps in easy recovery of the patient, lesser length of hospitalization and less time for recovery, less blood loss and tissue trauma. And we can achieve optimum trajectory much more easily, especially in obese patients. Usually obese patients require a much more larger incision than normal. So that is avoided in this case of percutaneous pedicle screw fixations. So this is what I was trying to explain. This is a normal anatomy that you see. So usually the retractors are kept in place and the muscle is kept retracted for much more period of time, resulting in necrosis and all. But in the case of percutaneous pedicle screw fixations, you can go through the muscle, split it, and the same lateral to medial trajectory and a good purchase can be achieved. So that's why the pedicle screws, percutaneous pedicle screw attain this much of significance. And these changes are also demonstrated with studies also. This is a study showing the postoperative imaging, comparing an open pedicle screw fixation and a percutaneous pedicle screw fixation. So there is much less tissue dissection involved. You can achieve the same result. You can see the postoperative muscle edema. And more than that, the strength of the muscle, the extension power of the muscle is also lost. And that also results in adds to the spinal instability and patient movement restriction. All this has been demonstrated. The percutaneous pedicle screw fixation is nothing new. It was described by Magarel himself as early as 1982. So the problem was not in putting the pedicle screws. People were able to put the pedicle screws optimally, but connection between them was an issue. So Magarel used an external fixator that was very, he used it for temporary fixation of the spine. Later on it was released, and but we can all visualize and understand that it was difficult and cumbersome for both for the patient as well as for the doctor. Then Matthews and Long described a wholly percutaneous pedicular screw system. He used plates and connectors that the connector was used to be in the suprafacial plane. So that also was not that biomechanically advantageous, and it was discomfort for the patient also. And Lowry and Kulkarni came out with connection with rods in 2000. So from then on, the instrumentation systems have steadily improved, and we have so many companies giving us pedicle screw fixations, percutaneous systems in different types. So what are the uses of percutaneous fixation? They remain essentially the same as of any open pedicle screw fixation. It can be used in trauma. It can be used in degenerative listhesis. For discogenic pain when fusion is planned, you can use percutaneous pedicle screw fixation. For pars defect, wherever, in selected cases of pedicle screw fixation, you can use the percutaneous technique. In spondylodiscitis, you can use. In metastasis, you can use. So it becomes an additional tool with its unique advantages and disadvantages. What are the advantages? Advantages are lesser blood loss, less anesthetic challenges, hypotension, all these are avoided. And it can be used in a suboptimal patient who is metastatic cachexic patient. You can, percutaneous fixation may be suited better than an open fixation. But all the cases of open percutaneous fixation may not be suitable for the percutaneous fixation. So patient with severe lumbar canal stenosis, severe osteoporosis, and high-grade spondylolisthesis are considered contraindication with the current evolution of technology. So all the cases of percutaneous fixation, although it may be ideal in some cases, all the cases of open pedicle screw fixation may not be suitable for percutaneous fixation. So with that, I come to the operative technique, which is the main focus of today. It can be divided into pre-op planning, anesthesia and positioning, marking and fluoroscopy. And I would say the single most important step will be the pedicular access, how the pedicular access can be achieved. Then the screw insertion, rod insertion, decompressive maneuvers, and other corrective maneuvers like distraction, compression, etc. whenever required. So these are the essential, you can divide the operative techniques like this. About the pre-op planning. Why is pre-op planning so important in this? You are not doing a surgery where you can verify with your look and feel and all those things. It's purely a radiographically guided procedure. You can have some degree of feel, but it is not as good as you are doing an open surgery. So pre-op planning is of utmost importance. The images should be studied in detail. And whenever you don't do CT as a routine, but if CT is available, the pedicle morphology should be looked for. Any sclerotic pedicles, if at all, it should be there. It should be identified. And you can have a mental calculation, and you can have a calculation about the sagittal and axial angles of the pedicles, so that whatever you are going to instrument, you can have a angulation, it should be marked. And you should also look into the X-rays, plain X-rays, how is the pedicle looking like, because intraoperatively you are going to navigate yourself using the help of a CM and images, and more so with the AP image. So you should study the images in detail. And you should plan the surgery also, which are studied. As I think Dr. Pushparaj will be coming to that. MAS, which side you are going to decompress, and which side the site of decompression is planned, which side purely percutaneous fixation is planned. All this should be paid attention to and executed. It should be meticulously planned and executed. And you should get yourself familiarized with the various percutaneous instrumentation systems which are available. So there are different companies of, although the techniques remain the same, the fixation systems a little bit differ from each other. So you should get familiarized with the system that you are going to use. Should be able to understand the fluoroscopy unit. You should be able to guide the technician whenever he is taking the fluoroscopic images. A single CM may be used, a biplanar CM can be used. Jamshidi needle you might have also been used to, so it should also be familiarized. And radiolucent operating table is also a must. So that said, you can go ahead with the positioning. You should under general anesthesia with the patient prone, with the on top of chest roll and the abdomen hanging. And now you should verify that your area of interest is well visualized without hindrances in the CM. So adequate fluoroscopic and lateral images should be studied, and you should be able to analyze. So your area of interest should be, the CM should be freely movable under the table after positioning and draping. That should be made sure of at this stage. Another thing is that whenever you are going to shoot the images, the percutaneous pedicle screw fixation depends a lot on the AP image. So those who are familiar with the pedicle screw system and also with the vertebroplasty, you will know that what is a true AP image. When you are doing an open pedicle screw fixation, you take an AP image whenever required, that the CM will be like vertical. So it will be like vertical. But when you are when you are going to guide yourself for a pedicle screw insertion, you should make sure that the image is along the axis of the vertebra. This is of utmost importance. So understanding the radiology and understand is of utmost importance because it is a radiographically guided procedure. So when you are taking a true AP images, the end plates fall parallel to each other. And another thing is that the pedicles will come in the upper 1/3, and the pedicle should be symmetrical to the midline, and the spinous process should be in the center. So when this angle will be different for different vertebrae. If you are going to fix L3 and L4, L4 and L5, the angle for L3 will be different. The angle for L4 will be different. So this should be kept in mind. And after your patient is positioned, spend some time and identify and mark the true AP image. And it is better to make a note of the angle in which the CM is placed, so that it is easier to guide the CM into that particular position throughout the surgery. So a true AP image is of utmost importance. The pedicular shard, outline will be visible. So what you are visualizing is the cylindrical structure. That also should be, although you are seeing this in the AP view, this is the cylindrical structure, that also should be, you should have that correlation in your mind. So what we do is we mark the lateral pedicular line. We mark the needle along the axis of the vertebra also. So this is what we usually do. We use guide wire to mark the lateral border of the pedicular line. So this is what I was intending to say. You should have a projection. This can also be studied in the pre-op images. You can mark how much. So you can mark how much lateral you should begin. Actually, you should extrapolate the axis of the pedicle towards the skin and understand that how much lateral you have to start. So this is your lateral pedicular line what you are going to start. And when you are starting the incision is 1 or 2 centimeter lateral at least, depending on the thickness of the patient. So pedicular access is the next step. After this, all these lines are marked, what we routinely do is we mark the lateral pedicular line and the midpoint of the pedicle, and then we go and drape the patient. The draping should be made a little wider. Some systems will have this sextant system will have an arc so that the insertion of the rod will be little bit farther from the pedicle screw entry. So you should make allowance for the soft tissue thickness, and you should start after painting and draping, you should start the incision little lateral, and mostly it will be little capillate to the lateral pedicular line or your point of marking. You can use a spinal needle initially. You can get that feel. You can actually feel the transverse process at the level of the incision. You can, you can walk along the TP, and you can actually feel the TP facet junction. So that can also be, you can, those who are planning or to start percutaneous pedicle screw fixation, they can, in other cases also, they can take little time when you are marking for an open case. During the draping stage or when in your preoperative marking, you can get a feel of the TP when you are planning to start percutaneous pedicle screw fixation anytime. After that, the gem study needle is taken, and you create a percutaneous channel into the pedicle, and this is done under AP and lateral fluoroscopic guidance. So this is the axis of the pedicle. If one single step is important, I would say this is the single most important step. You should make sure that the pedicle is not breached during this process. I will come to that in a little bit detail. So as I told you, the pedicle is a cylindrical structure. So this is the pedicle. So throughout your surgery, you should take care to see that the pedicle margins are not breached with your needle. If it is breached, it can result in serious neurological damage. One thing that you need to understand is that the medial border of the pedicle and the inferior border violations are more hazardous than the superior and the lateral. So medial pedicular breach and the inferior pedicular breach should be avoided at all costs, because medially it can damage the thecal sac, it can damage the spinal cord if you are at the dorsal levels, and inferior it can damage the nerve root. So going and pricking and the nerve root can be hazardous. It can result in epidural hematoma. It can result in nerve root damage. So this is of our utmost concern, and I would say this is the single most important step according to me. So this is the cylindrical structure. So you should start in the lateral border of the pedicle, and you should aim at the center of the pedicle. So when you are reaching the posterior border of the vertebral body, you should make sure that the medial pedicular border is not violated. Your needle is not crossing into the medial pedicular. Okay. So this is what I meant. So the needle should be along the long axis of the pedicle, and it should not violate the medial border. We will be coming to the surgical steps in a short video also. So I have crossed now the posterior border. I have crossed into the vertebral body. I am into the posterior border of the vertebral body, and the medial pedicular border is not breached. So that's the prime most important thing. After that, you can be a little relaxed. Usually it takes, when you start, you take more of CMs, make sure that you are not violating the medial pedicular border at every step. And you can go little by little, correcting the angle if required, and you can slowly enter into the vertebral body. Those who are, usually the same steps come in transpedicular biopsy also, the same steps come in vertebroplasty also, but they are not this stringent. But here you have to instrument also, so you should be along the long axis of the pedicle, and you should be in line with the pedicle. So the aim is not to reach it somehow, but it should, you should be in a position to put the pedicle screw in the optimum axis. So this is another, both the sides pedicles are cannulated without breaching the medial border. So once that is done, you can go for a variable depth into the vertebral body depending on the cortical thickness. You can go up to half of the vertebral body, maybe to between half and 1/3, and you can remove the trocar of the Jamshedi needle. After that, the inner trocar is removed and the guide wire is inserted into the pedicle. And most of the companies, they provide the K-wire in such a way that one end is sharp and other end is blunt. So ideally, their markings are associated, they are decided in such a way that you are putting it into the sharp end into the vertebral body. But sometimes in patients with the decreased cortical thickness, it can also be hazardous. So sometimes we put the blunt end also, but you should, they are decided in such a way that the measurement is taken with the sharp end into the vertebral body. And the K-wire should be within your, you should have a mental idea where your K-wire is throughout the steps of surgery. It can advance inadvertently. It can even damage the anterior cortex, and it can damage the major blood vessels also. Once the K-wire is snugly fit, you can remove the Jamshedi needle. So this is it. So when you are doing surgery, make sure that your long axis, the K-wire, the needle and the K-wire are in perfect axis for further steps, and it should be ideally in the center of the pedicle, symmetrical, so that symmetric expansion of the pedicle, expansion of the channel can take place. So once this is done, the biggest step is over. Then you should take care to see that the K-wire is not slipping. You can dilate using a sequential dilators over the K-wire. And this also should be placed coaxially. It should come in the center of the axis ideally. 3 or 4 sequential dilators are used, and the last one, which is allowing the needle, which is allowing the screw to pass through, is kept in place. After that, so you should verify with the CM so that your dilator is also in line with the pedicle, and after that you can start tapping. Depending on the bone quality, you can either under trap or maybe you can use the tap of the correct size. Usually the lumbar pedicles will come, as you know, in 5.5, 4.5, and 6.5. So I mean, whatever. So you can choose a tap, and depending on the bone quality, you can decide on the whether to do under tapping or not. One important thing that is to be kept in mind is that the position of the guide wire should be kept in mind. The guide wire the K-wire, if the sharp end is put, it can advance, it can turn along when you tap, and there are cases in which it can go anteriorly and pierced. So that should be kept in mind. That is the biggest danger that can occur at this point of time. After tapping, the dilator is removed and the guide wire is kept. And depending on the system that you are going to use, either a screw extender assembly or a long screw is put. So this is a screw extender assembly provided with one of the companies. So they have this extender assembly which projects and it helps in the position of the rod. So make sure that your screw is in optimal position. Verify with the CMs and confirm. And the second screw is put in the similar fashion. Various companies have different systems of measuring the rod. This is a sextant system in which they use an arc-based system where you can measure the rod. That said, I don't have any affiliation to any company. So this is the extensors that we have kept. The extensors are aligned and the rod insertion can be attached to this. So that is one of the systems. So this is how, after putting the extenders, the rod is put through another stab incision. So sorry for this. So after that, the rods can be passed on to the through the screw heads. Various companies have different mechanisms for ensuring that the screw heads are passing, the rod is passing optimally through the screw head. This is another system wherein the same rods can pass through the screw holes. And after the rods are passed optimally, you can tighten the screws and you can place that in. You can tighten the screws. Make sure that they are radiographically aligned. This is a short video of how we routinely do. So I'll run through the video. This is a marking that the preoperative marking that is taking place. It's difficult to navigate with this. So there's after cleaning, I am marking the pedicle screw insertion points. The level is identified. Sorry. So this is a first Jamshedi needle going in. As you can see, ideally it should be at the 9 o'clock position in the left side and should be in the 3 o'clock position in the right side. So we are little cranial there, not in the center of the pedicle, but still an acceptable trajectory. We are deciding to proceed. So that is in the upper aspect of the pedicle in the lateral view. No breach of the medial border. We are advancing the needle. So this is into the vertebral body now. After that, the trocar is removed and the guide wire is kept. After making sure that the guide wire is properly in place, the Jamshedi needle is being removed now. So the K-wire remains in position. Basically, you expand the incision after that. These are the sequential dilators which are going in. The second dilator, the third one. We are enlarging the incision around the dilators. So that's the final dilator in place. So the final dilator in place, and this one is the first dilator is removed. The other dilators are removed. This is again for marking, for measuring the length of the screw. The length of the screw is marked. That is the tab going in. At every step, it is made sure that the K-wire is not advancing. So you can see the CM image. The tap is gone into the posterior aspect of the vertebral body. One important thing is to be noted is that, sorry for that. Yeah. The K-wire should be in line with the axis of whatever instrument you keep. If the K-wire bends, it will be very difficult to retrieve that. That's another thing that you should pay attention to. So after tapping, the K-wire should be kept in place. Make sure that it is not getting withdrawn also. After that, the screws are inserted. So that is the screw. We can save the CM. This we have put the screws, and now we are verifying with the other level also. The spinal needle you can see. So the other level is also happening. This was a case planned with for A-leaf. So the second screw is a little more ideal trajectory. It is in the center of the pedicle. The same steps are repeated, and the screw insertion is also happening. After that, you break open the screw heads also. This is a system where we introduce through the same incision as the stab incision of the screws. So the rods are being inserted into the screw heads. So this happens bluntly, and there is an instrument to verify that your screw, the rod is in perfect alignment with the screws. So this is the first rod going in place, and the final tightening also happening. So the screw further, the sleeves are broken off, and we are starting with the other side. So this is okay. So then further corrective maneuvers, if any distraction, compression, which can be done at this stage can be done, and any and then the rod is finally tightened. Some difficulties that one can experience during percutaneous pedicle screw insertion. So if the initial position of the K-wire is not very ideal, then you can tap over that, and it is said that we can little bit angulate, under tap, and little bit change the direction of the screws. That can be done, but make sure that it is not bent at an acute angle. Otherwise, the K-wire will get stuck and will not be removable. Small pedicles, axial inline CM, image intensifier, outside view help. This is especially important in dorsal screws. We are restricting ourselves to mostly the lower dorsal and lumbar levels. We don't have much experience in putting above the lower dorsal level. The L5S1 screw heads can come in very close contact with each other, and it will be very difficult to manipulate them. Not to avoid that, you can have a lower, you can start with a lower starting point in case of S1. Multi-level construct, you should pay attention to detail that all the screw heads are aligning in a fixation position. Sclerotic pedicles can especially be difficult, which might not allow the usual passage of the wires and all. So sometimes it needs to be drilled. Some tips and tricks for a person who is starting to practice. You will be noticing that at the end we open it sequentially, and the incision is will be good enough to admit your one or two fingers, or one finger at least. So whenever you are experiencing difficulty in your initial cases, you can convert that to an open pedicle screw fixation. You should have the usual pedicle owl along with you. Repeated tapping and can damage the pedicle beyond, you lose the landmark. So if you are experiencing more trouble with the initial cases, the stab incision can be little bit converted to, that's one of my experience. So it can be converted into a little larger incision, and you can actually put in an open pedicle screw with that. You are used to that. And start with the L4-5 or L3-4 levels where it is, the angulation is little bit easier. L5-S1 might be little bit difficult. And be careful with the K-wire always. Inadvertent advancement of the K-wire should be avoided. And better to keep it in the axis of the pedicles. And when you are starting your private practice, when you cannot afford to make mistakes, you can start with the transpedicular biopsy, vertebroplasty, etc. And then if you go ahead and do the transpedicular fixation, it will be much more easier because you are much used to the pedicular axis. So that is one important thing. Vertebroplasty and transpedicular biopsy are good cases, and you should feel the bony feel that you get. So the uses of pedicle screw fixation I have already told in selective cases of trauma. And luxation injuries and long distance rotational injuries with the current technology are difficult, although some people are doing that. So this is one case of osteomyelitis in a very deranged patient. We have done a pedicle screw fixation. Then various adaptations of the MA screw fixation, we'll be going into MA STLIF very shortly. Then you can combine it with a vertebroplasty or a kyphoplasty. We have also started to use a 360-degree short segment fusion for some of our cases. It can be used as a supplement to anterior fixation. So this is an example of an L5-S1 TLIF that was done. In selected cases of vertebral body fractures, you can augment with a kyphoplasty in addition to the transpedicular screw fixation. We have recently started to do, for the past few years, we have started to do a circumferential fixation. We put the percutaneous screw fixation and a mini open approach on the other side, and we put a cage fixation also in selected cases of patient with fracture and canal compromise. So, summarizing the advantages of MAS pedicle screw fixation are that it splits the paraspinal muscle, it reduces the postoperative pain, it reduces the intraoperative blood loss. One of the advantages of the low blood loss is that in a polytrauma patient, an early surgery can be done, and high-risk geriatric patient wherein blood loss will not be will be very damaging for the patient. You can do a percutaneous fixation. And it has demonstrated the improved postoperative VAS functional outcome and limited size incisions with minimal exposure, and it reduces the chance of infection. The limitations are open pedicle screw fixations are performed and verified by field, whereas minimally invasive is largely done by radiological reference. So the chance of cortical breach is more. It has got a steep learning curve. It is increased patient and surgeon exposure to radiation. There is inability to perform the direct decompression and inability to fuse. These are some of the limitations. Radiation exposure being the most hazardous of these. An average of various studies have demonstrated because it's a radiologically guided procedure. Lot of radiation goes into place, and further steps like navigation and robotic guidance will reduce the radiation exposure. We don't have a navigation enabled pedicle screw fixation yet. We are in the process of acquiring that. So different navigation systems can be used, and definitely robotic arms are also coming into the way. So with that, I would like to end today's session. Any questions will be welcome. Thank you, Ram, for this opportunity, and thank you all for the wonderful participation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for short and crisp presentation about the pedicle screw fixation. So we'll take some couple of questions. Dr. Rakesh, you want to ask anything? Rakesh?
Hello.
Yes, Rakesh. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello, sir. Good evening, sir. This is Dr. Rakesh Hevi. A very nice presentation, sir. It was very helpful, the pedicle entry points, and it was very nicely presented. Sir, I have one. Hello.
Yes.
I have two questions. One is, in most of these cases, the pain or the symptoms are because of decompression. Pedicle screws can be put easily, in the sense after some 5 to 10 cases. But how about the decompression? Will the incision will be less enough to call it as a minimally invasive surgery for doing a decompression, adequate decompression by minimal invasive surgery? So,
The next part of the presentation will be on MAS Philip only.
Yeah, the next presentation is coming up, and some cases where only fixation will be sufficient, we stop with the pedicle screw fixation alone. Whereas in other cases where decompression is required, as in a T-leaf or maybe a circumferential fusion, we limitedly open the other side also. So adequate decompression can be achieved that, and can be achieved. And MAS T-leaf also, only when one side is more involved than the other, and with the unilateral symptoms, you go ahead and decompress the other side. So percutaneous fixation is not a solution to the decompression part. Decompression part, you should be thinking and you should be selecting cases in such a way that the decompression is also addressed. And one thing is that if it is unilateral, you can go limitedly open the other side and do a decompression. So percutaneous fixation as such will not take care of the decompression part. So the decompression has to be separately done.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
There are selective cases of trauma in which you need a fixation. There is not much of canal compromise, but it is a 3-column injury, type A fractures can be fixed with percutaneous fixation. Okay, so there a lot of decompression is not planned.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So how many levels of fixation do you do? Maximum.
Up to 4 levels you have done. The problem is not with actually putting the pedicle screws becomes easier, but the problem is with the radiation exposure. So on an average, I think 50 to 60 we verify at every step, and up to 4 levels can be done using the various systems. But the radiation hazard becomes too much, and so we are restricting ourselves to limited levels where the patient demands, where a single, 2-level fixation, single level fixation we are choosing for pedicle screw fixation. We are not using extensive levels. Only when the patient demands, we are using.
Yeah, that is an important point which I told you, sir. Radiation will be more not only for the patient, for even the surgeon as well.
The surgeon, it is too much hazardous. On an average, we have noted that roughly 100 plus radiation shot goes into. There are people who are claiming that they do with a less number of shots, but because of the patient safety, we are tended little to shoot more rather than less, because at every stage, where advancement can happen. You should verify that your instruments are falling in axis. Pedicle axis, as I told, is more important. So at every step, we keep on verifying, because the patient safety is of utmost concern, and we cannot have a deficit out of this. So when that is done, the CM shot becomes too much. Otherwise, navigation has got its own advantages, but it is also not real time actually. You are working on a pre-acquired image. And that also needs to be verified, because it is not real time. You are pre-acquired image is done, and maybe after CM integration, maybe things will be a little better.
Yeah, the radiation has significantly reduced with navigation, but at the chances that it might go abnormal. So that's why always we have to serially check. And,
you always have to serially.
Yeah, Gopi. Is there any questions, Gopi, Rajesh Babu? So maximum level which I have done is 5 level for a trauma using a navigation, and the chances, how we do is we try to cut the radiation and as well as the time also, that 2 surgeons operate together on either sides, so that we do not waste time.
Yeah, but still the radiation exposure will be there now.
Yeah. Navigation is the only way to cut.
Okay.
So if there are no other questions, I will welcome Dr. Vignesh to proceed ahead with MAS T-leaf. And I thank Dr. Anup once again, and I request him to share. Please stay here so that we can have some discussion at the end.
Sure.
Please, we can moderate at the end of the session.
Sure.
Ram, is my screen visible?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, Vignesh, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I thank Ram for the opportunity. The topic for today will be minimal invasive transforaminal lumbar interbody fusion. I don't have any disclosures, and the video courtesy goes to Dr. Neeraj Vasoda from Ahmedabad and our Ram from Bangalore. Okay.
Can you put it in slideshow, please?
Yeah, it's there in slideshow, Ram.
It is, yeah, that one, correct, yes. Please go ahead.
That's not visible?
It's clean now, go ahead.
Okay. Okay then. Overview. The overview of my presentation will be having the tubes and their types, the instrument needed for MIS spine surgery, and the spine 3D orientation, good and bad of MIS, open versus MIS, and MIS T-lift steps and techniques, over the top decompression, and the learning curve. Starting with tube system. Tube system has got K-wire with the sequential dilators and expandable tube with an attachment arm. The attachment arm, which is present here, is the major instrument which is used to fix the tubular retractor to the table. It holds the tube all through the surgery, which allows us to do a peaceful surgery. And the tubular retractor system uses, and the major advantages are, it holds the underlying tissues. Area of interest, operating field could be assessed easily through the tubes. Good visualization with illumination and magnification. It minimizes the soft tissue damage. Deep visualization through the small incision. It is more easy in operating on an obese patient and in over a thoracic spine. And we can operate up to 2 to 3 levels using tubes. 2D and 3D visualization of anatomy is possible through these tubes. Contralateral surgery with ipsilateral approach is also possible. Coming to the types of tubular retractors. The tubular retractors are of 3 types. The first one is a non-expandable tubular retractor, which is of fixed length, fixed diameter, used for a single level of surgery. Mostly these types of tubes are used to do microdiscectomies and microdiscompression. This comes in 2 shapes. One will be oval shape and the second one will be a circular in shape, which allows to place and work deep. The oval design helps for a maximum cranial and caudal exposure and minimizes the medial lateral soft tissue pressure. And the second type of tubular retractor is a deeper, widened retractor only in the deeper plane, not in the superficial plane. It is also used for multiple adjacent segment surgeries. And the third one is the most common retractor, which is used in most of our surgeries, used independently to expand both cranial and caudal and mediolateral views. And the major disadvantage of this retractor is the soft tissue damages and the large operating window, resulting in a significant post-operative pain comparing to the previous 2 retractors. But the pain produced in comparison to the open surgery is much less comparing to the open surgeries. And the instrument required for the MIS surgery is intraoperative fluoroscopy, microscope, sequential dilators, tubular retractor system, bayoneted high-speed burr, long Kerrison forceps, and bayoneted curettes, interbody preparatory instruments, bayoneted micro instruments. The bayoneted micro instruments plays a major role. Although it is not used very frequently, it helps us during the complication times in such as of dural leaks. These instruments are very important. We have to keep it in hand in all the surgeries, whether you use it or not. Here we start with the case example. The 51 years old female presented with complaints of pain over the low back radiating to the right lower limb for the past 4 months. Claudication present, numbness of the right lower limb is present. Back pain is more than leg pain, and the neurology revealed right EHL weakness with reduced sensation of the L5 dermatome over right side. The MRI shows the degenerated facet joint with the hypertrophied facet with the fluid inside the facet on left side and the hypertrophied facet on the right side. With the neural compression on both sides, it's almost equal. And the sagittal MRI shows a grade 1 slip here. And these are the X-rays showing a grade 1 slip in the standing without any dynamic views. And the dynamic views also show the same. And this is a fixed listhesis. It doesn't get corrected on flexion and extension images. So the diagnosis will be L4-5 grade 1 to grade 2 listhesis, and the plan of management will be L4, L5 TLIF. So how are we planning to do it? Minimal invasive way and open way. So the advantages of minimal invasive spine surgery are less postoperative pain, less hospital stay for the patient, early return to their regular day-to-day routine. Obese patients can be treated with less complications. The major disadvantages of MIS TLIF are the long learning curve for the surgeons, with initial complications such as dural tears, hematoma formation, and the prolonged surgical time during the learning curve, and the radiation exposure to the surgeon. But the long-term clinical outcome in patients is same in both the surgeries, both open and MIS surgeries. Okay. The main goal of the MIS surgery is not to erase the muscle attachment from the midline structures, to preserve the paraspinal muscles from its insertion. So the tubes are placed at an angle of 30 to 45 degrees depending upon the surgery what we are planning to do. So understanding the 3D anatomy. In this picture, we are viewing a female's face from front to front. We can visualize the whole face from the front. In the next two images, we are viewing the same face from the left side and the right side. But we can visualize the same face by rotating the face, or we can move over the opposite standing person's face and see the whole face. The same principle has to be applied in MIS spine surgery. Here, the spinal cord is viewed from the posterior, and the extreme two images shows that the spinal cord is viewed from the right side as well as left side. Kindly correlate the same here with that female's image. We can visualize the whole spine by moving over the spine from right side to left side or from left side to right side with the help of a microscope and through the tubes. That's what we are going to discuss through this whole presentation. This will be the spinal cord. This is how we put an incision over the posterior aspect of the spinal cord, and these are all the anatomy, what we see, the bony anatomy and the roots in posterior open incision. In case of minimal invasive spine surgery, we will be operating through the tubes, and the tubes will be docked over a spine from one side of the spine, either right side or left side. Normally, the tubes will be placed on the major pain producing or pain generated side. For example, this patient was having a right sided pain, so the tubes will be docked mainly over the right side. Or else, if the patient is having pain on both sides, the tube can be docked on either of the sides with the comfort of the surgeon's day-to-day routine. If the surgeon is a right-handed surgeon, normally the surgeon will prefer to operate from the left side of the patient. For a same thing here, we are taking this patient and we are going to demonstrate an MIS TLIF on this patient. So we are putting our tubes over the right side of the patient, and this is the bony and the neural anatomy which we are going to visualize. Okay. Open versus MIS anatomical landmarks. In the exposure and in the proceedings of open and an MIS spine surgery, these are all the sequential of bony anatomy and the procedures what we will be going through. In open surgery, we will be first visualizing the spinous process, followed by lamina, followed by pars, followed by interlaminar space, followed by flavum, and followed by facet joint. And we will be proceeding the neural decompression from inside to outside. But in case of MIS spine surgery, it is ulta. We start visualizing the facet joint first, followed by the interlaminar space, followed by flavum, pars, lamina, spinous process. And again, the neural decompression will be started from outside and we will be proceeding towards inside in minimal invasive spine surgery. This is the major difference which we have to keep it in mind before starting an MIS spine surgery. As Dr. Anup told, after inserting all the guide wires, it depends upon the surgeon's perspective and it depends upon the surgeon's training. Most of the surgeons would like to put the screws on the opposite side and leave the KYs on this side, or some surgeons leave all the guide wires and they start operating and they start doing their TLIFs, interbody work, decompression, and then at last they will put their screws and rods. Here we are going to put it the same way. We will, as Dr. Anup told, the guide wire is already in situ for the pedicle screw. So now we are planning to do an MIS TLIF for this patient from the right side. The skin incision for all the MIS surgeries varies. For example, if we are planning to do a PLIF, the incision for PLIF is less distance from the midline comparing to T-leaf. For a T-leaf, the skin incision has to be placed in the lateral aspect of the facet joint, approximately 4.5 centimeter away from the midline. After planning the incision, we have to take a AP and lateral view of the patient. We have to parallelize the end plates, and the end plates has to be marked, and the lateral border of the facet joints has to be marked. As per the guidelines, the incision will be right over the lateral aspect of the facet joints. And the initial dilator is placed. The initial dilator is placed over the facet joint at an angle of 90 degrees or perpendicular to the vertebral bodies and parallel to the disc space. The soft tissue dilator is inserted over the other dilators. The dilator is advanced down the bony anatomy. Using the dilator, the anatomy is palpated in both coronal and sagittal planes. The two maneuvers are followed while inserting the dilators. One is twisting and the second one is vaguing. The twisting and the vaguing maneuvers help to split the muscles than cutting the muscles. After sequential dilator, appropriate tubular retractor is placed over the sequential dilators and seated firmly over the bony anatomy. The appropriate size of the tubular retractor is confirmed with the mark over the last dilator which is placed. And the breadth and the length is measured with this dilator and the skin contact. An X-ray is taken at this stage to check the position of tube in relation to the pathology. If repositioning of the tubular retractor is necessary, the retractor can be moved or angled over the pathology. Here, after positioning the tubes, we have to take an AP and a lateral image. As we mentioned earlier, the tube has to be placed dead parallel to the disc space and perpendicular to the vertebral body, so that the working channel helps us to see the required anatomy. This is the anatomy of the surgical field, and this is the anatomy of the surgical field which we are going to focus and visualize under a microscope. Kindly correlate the anatomy with the tube imaging. This is the lumbar anatomy through the tubes. We have to correlate, remember, and appreciate the relationship between the bony anatomy and the neural structures. Here we can appreciate the relationship between the L4 nerve root and the L4 L5 facet joint and the L5 nerve root. All the anatomy relationship has to be appreciated and it has to be remembered all through the surgery. After placing the first tubular after placing the tubes, initially we will be having a minimal soft tissue which can be appreciated, and the facet capsule will be palpated through our cautery, and this soft tissue has to be removed subperiosteally so that the bone and the anatomy needed can be appreciated. Initially we can see the facet joint at a 6 o'clock position and the lamina over a 3 to 5 o'clock position and the interlaminar space at almost 9 to 10 o'clock position. We have to appreciate all these three anatomy before starting our procedure. Whatever, it may be MIS T-leaf, or it may be interlaminar decompression, or it may be over the top decompression, other than the discectomy procedure. After appreciating this anatomy and correlating with the landmark and neural relationship, proceed to the next step of osteotomy. The osteotomy in MIS T-leaf is of two osteotomies. One is spinolaminar osteotomy, and the second will be osteotomy at the pars. The spinolaminar osteotomy will be done at the base of the spinous process, and the osteotomy at the pars will be done dead perpendicular to the spinolaminar osteotomies. This small video demonstrates the osteotomies.
Yeah, right. Yes, sir.
Here, the marking of the osteotomy is done. The spinolaminar junction and the pars is marked. The osteotomy is better done with a chisel than using an osteotome. High-speed drills can also be used to do these osteotomies, depends upon the availability to the surgeons. But make sure the After the osteotomy, we need the bone to do our interbody fusion. Don't use high-speed burr to remove the bone in piecemeal. As it is removed here, kindly make sure the bone is removed in toto. Again, coming to the anatomical relationship, anatomical landmark relationship to the neural tissues. This is after doing the osteotomies. This is the relationship of the bone with the neural tissues and the ligamentum flavum. Here, after remove the bony chunk, we could see the pedicle. We could appreciate the pedicle, superior articular process of the cephaloid vertebra, and the ligamentum flavum over here. Then the superior articular process of the cephaloid vertebra is removed with the Kerrison ronger, as it is removed here. The main purpose of using a Kerrison ronger is to preserve the bone, and the Kerrison ronger is used to erase the ligamentum flavum attachments from the anterior aspect of this articular process. The ligamentum flavum is left intact to protect the dura from our work. Then a nerve root hook is used to release the adhesions and attachments between the ligamentum flavum and the dural structures. And again, a Kerrison ronger is used to remove the ligamentum flavum. Make sure we use a cotton patty in our initial stages while using a Kerrison ronger between dura and the ligamentum flavum, or a Kerrison ronger between dura and the bony tissue. After completing this step, the dura and the transversing nerve root will be free. Make sure we remove the overlay or the overhang bone of the cranial or caudal laminas. Mostly there will be overhang bone over the caudal aspect somewhere here. Make sure we remove that so that it doesn't get buckled over the thecal sac and the nerve roots. After doing this, by coagulating the epidural vessels over the disc space, we reach this triangle called as Cambian triangle. We all know what is Cambian triangle, which is formed by the exiting nerve root and the caudal vertebra and the transversing nerve root. Here we can appreciate this triangle. When we could appreciate this triangle, we can easily do an interbody work through this triangle. After identifying this triangle, the subtotal discectomy is performed, retracting the nerve root thecal sac with the nerve root retractor or with the suction root retractors. After end plate preparation, appropriate size cage is inserted with a bone. The interbody spaces are used to distract between the vertebral bodies to reduce the slippage. From minimum 1 grade reduction is tried, and the size and its position of the cage is confirmed with the CM imaging. Then now going to the contralateral decompression. Before going into the contralateral decompression, we have to understand that we are not going to move towards the opposite side. We are going to use the microscope, tubes, and the table rotation to work over the opposite side, that is the contralateral side. Initially, the operating table is tilted almost 20 degrees away from the surgeon. That means towards the resistance or towards the opposite side. Then followed by that, the retractor tube is also tilted 20 degree from the surgeon towards the contralateral side. Here, the retractor tube will be tilted towards the surgeon, focusing towards the contralateral side, and the microscope will be tilted in line with the retractor tube, like this. And this video demonstrates how the contralateral decompression is done. After releasing the overhanging soft tissues, a nerve root hook is used to release the adhesions as usual between the dura and the ligamentum flavum and the soft tissues. Then a Kerrison ronger is used to remove these structures. Following that, the table is tilted 20 degrees. Following the table, the tube is tilted towards the surgeon with the help of the largest dilator, focusing towards the contralateral side. you can see that the tube is tilted towards the ipsilateral side, towards the contralateral side, and the microscope is aligned in the angle of the tubes. Then the remaining ligamentum flavum is removed with a Kerrison ronger. If you could come across a bony osteophyte, high-speed drill is used to remove that bony osteophytes. Make sure you use a cotton patty between the bone and the dural structures, and the cotton patty between the ligamentum flavum or the soft tissues and the dura. This is the contralateral ligamentum flavum after removing the soft tissues and the bony osteophytes, which will be present between the 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock position on the opposite side. This contralateral ligamentum flavum will be removed with the help of a Kerrison ronger. And the ligamentum flaval removal and the completion of the contralateral decompression is appreciated only when the nerve root probe freely moves inside the traversing foramen of the contralateral side, like this. Here the nerve root is placed inside the contralateral side foramen, followed by the easy retraction of the dural structures, so that we can appreciate the end plate of the contralateral side from the ipsilateral side. Then the screws and rods are placed. Screws and rods are placed such that in compression between the screws over the cage has to be maintained. The major important points to remember in MIS surgeries are the skin incision with respect to the procedure changes. For example, if we are planning to do a discectomy and a laminectomy and a stenosis, the skin incision will be almost 1 to 1.5 centimeters away from the midline. If we are planning for the PLIF, it will be much more distant than the discectomy side. If we are planning for a forlateral disc, it is much far from the midline. Here in pedicle screws, the incision has to be placed at the distance of 3 to 3.5 centimeters, and in case of transforaminal lumbar interbody fusion, the incision has to be placed at a 4 to 4.5 centimeters away from the midline, so that the tube can get docked at an angle of 30 to 45 degree, depending upon the work we have to do in future. This positioning of tubes will guide us to work all through the surgery. If our positioning of tubes is wrong, we can't reach the contralateral side or ipsilateral side, we will be stuck in the middle. And the second point will be the tube docking. Tube docking position has to be confirmed. Don't hesitate to take multiple fluoroscopic AP and lateral imaging, so that the tube has to be placed dead parallel to the disc spaces and perpendicular to the vertebral body. Better not to skip any of the surgical steps, and kindly maintain surgeon patience during the steep learning curve. And the tips to overcome the steep learning curve: initially start with a tubular discectomy, simple cases, go towards the challenging case and move towards the complex cases. For example, start with the discectomy over the tubes and in a decompression in a moderate canal stenosis, followed by a decompression in a severe canal stenosis, followed by a percutaneous pedicle screws, followed by MIS TLIF in a thin patient. Kindly repeat the MIS TLIF in thin patient. Try and do the over-the-top decompression in a thin patient for a minimum of 10 to 15 times, then go on into an MIS TLIF of an obese patient. If you are planning to do MIS TLIF of an obese patient, you should be trained enough and you should be confident enough to handle the dural tears or the complications what we are going to place. Nowadays, we can do scoliosis as an orthopedic surgeon's point of view through the tubes, and intradural tumor removals from the surgeon's point of view through the tubes. And the take-home points are: kindly know the instruments, kindly know your staff and the helping system to know your instrument, understand the 3D view of the spine. Kindly use 1 to 2 set of instruments or 1 to 2 companies, so that your staff gets familiarized with the instruments. It reduces the operating time for a surgeon. It reduces anesthesia time for this patient too. Start playing the microscope and its instrument regularly. Don't hesitate to use the microscope. If you are in a system or if you are in a setup to have with the microscope, kindly use it regularly for small cases. If you are doing an open decompression also, start using a microscope, so that the hands, the movements and everything of the microscope comes in place. Understand and appreciate the anatomical relationship with the bony landmark and the neural structures, which will help you to do MIS surgery very soon. And the precision of the anatomy and the neural structure relationship will help you to overcome the long learning curve as soon as possible. And the last point is we can easily cross the learning curve with our patients. Don't get afraid or panic during the complication time. Don't get panic. Don't hesitate to call for help in your system. If you don't have any of your colleagues in your system, don't hesitate to call from outside also. Thank you.
Thanks,
വീട്ടിൽ നിന്ന് വിളിക്കുന്നുണ്ടോ എന്നാ നോക്കിയേ.
Dr. Vignesh. That was excellent talk. I hope all participants will be able to see only the girls' face here when they're doing surgery, I think. If they told so whenever they do MIS, they will remember this guy.
Yeah, it's easy to remember that girl's face when we do an MIS TLIF. Normally, the major problem or the major lack of understanding among the open surgeons will be how are we going to appreciate the opposite side from this side. Normally the tubes will be placed at an angle of 35 to 40 degrees. Max it go up to 45 degrees. From that angle, by tilting the table and by tilting the tubes and the microscope, we can easily move over it.
So, any questions? Dr. Anu, can you join with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Any questions? Participants, any questions? Yeah. How adequate? Yeah, one question. Dr. Sharath, you can unmute yourself and then ask question.
Sir, good evening, Dr. Sharath. I'm also with Dr. Ram Sakra Hospital doing my fellowship. Just we have seen a few cases here. We find that because in a routine MIS TLIF, we usually do only a prostatectomy on one side.
Okay.
So the query we always have, we discuss among ourselves is that for preparing and putting the bone grafts inside, especially when you don't use a cage, how adequate is the local graft available using one-side prostatectomy?
That may not be that adequate because we have to understand that putting 4 rods is not fusion. We have to prepare the end plates. We have to prepare the disc space. As we all know, the disc space have got 40 grams of disc. So we have to adequately fill it with bone graft. If we want more bone graft, the better idea will be take the tube from the right side, place it over the left side. Kindly extend the incision between the percutaneous screws. Take the facet joints on the opposite side and you can nibble it and put it inside the interbody also. That sometimes we do it.
Okay. So
if we don't get an adequate bone, couple of things what we do is we go on the opposite side, nibble the facet joint, take it out. And the second thing is we will drill or we will use the Kerrison rongers, remove the more base of lamina from our side. If all these things are not working, then no other go. We have to use an artificial bone depending upon the financial situation of the patient, or as usual, we have to go towards the posterior iliac crest.
That's what. So,
Dr. Vignesh, how will you manage a dural tear?
So basically, if it is a point dural tear or it is an established dural tear, we have to suture it. No point in leaving it. We have to use the bayoneted instruments. We have to suture the same with the bayoneted instruments. Make sure that repeated Valsalvas are given, and then make sure there is no CSF leak. Use a fibrin glue over the sutures. Give a watertight closure. These are all the steps what we follow. That's what I told in the initial phases. Those bayoneted micro instruments are the key. We have to keep it in the table regularly. And if you want to use those instruments regularly, better use those instruments in open surgeries also, so that you get used to use the bayoneted micro instruments under the microscope inside the tubes.
Sometimes the dural tear may not be suturable also, and we can, it may be in some inaccessible location, and tight water closure might not be obtained. And
sometimes
maybe,
in those
wherever feasible, you should suture it. No doubt.
I accept this. I accept this point. Sometimes.
Sometimes. So you
In
can
these
do
kinds,
you can do a fat graft also. That's
yeah,
one technique.
yeah. We will do what we will do is we will place a fat graft.
Yeah.
We will take a piece of fat. We will make it a sandwich between the surgicel, place it over the dura, and then put a fibrin glue, put a watertight closure. Then we will place a continuous lumbar drain. We will use that continuous lumbar drain for a minimum period of 6 days. We will drain 5 to 10 ml of CSF. Whatever the wound is leaking or not, we will drain minimum 5 to 10 ml of CSF in the lumbar drain for the next 5 to 10 days. Then we remove the lumbar drain, sir.
Yeah. Sometimes
If we do all these things and then the CSF leaks, then it's on God. Believe in God. Nothing much to add.
This
I think
usually will not happen. Dr.
Usually it will not happen, and the space during dissection in a MIS TLIF is much less. It is not a wide cavity as in an open surgery. So sometimes it will be contained, and many of the times we are able to manage with a simple wound drain alone. And
yes, sir, the major thing with MIS surgery is we can the thing will get closed because we are splitting the muscles and going in. We are not opening it. The space is much smaller, and the water can't find its way to come out.
Exactly. So sometimes we might be able to manage with a wound drain alone. The aim is to get the stab wounds healed properly, so that the CSF is not leaking outside. So
it's the main thing I had faced in my own experience. Initially, I was using the no suction wound drain, but nowadays I gave it off because of two occasions. One occasion, the wound drain was in no suction and in gravity assisted drain. It started to pour more than 40 to 50 ml per hour. If I close the wound, per hour. If I close the drain, the wound, the CSF starts oozing through the wound. So I have to take this patient back. I have to wash it, and I have to put Tizzle. I have to put a watertight closure. Followed by that, as usual, then I went to my old techniques of putting a lumbar drain, keeping him in bed. So lumbar drain is not that difficult thing. It is very easy.
Yeah, it's not very difficult.
It is a very easy thing to manage. It is an additional cost. That's it. Nothing much.
Any more questions?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Can I ask you a question, sir?
Yeah, please.
In case of putting our tube, as far as we go medially, we encounter much more muscle bulk there, and we have to take that muscle bulk and we have to cut the muscle bulk also. Is there any way to avoid this cutting or taking the muscle bulk from the?
Yeah. Then if you are encountering a huge muscle bulk inside your tube, the two things would have gone wrong. The first thing would be the inadequate size of the tubes, which I mentioned in my PowerPoint presentation. The adequate size of the tube has to be measured with the last dilator size, with the breadth and the length. Normally, the problem will be the length. You would have taken a small tube with respect to the size. And the second thing will be the landmark of incision. For example, if you are planning to do an MIS TLIF, you would have taken a much medial incision so that you can't tilt the tube. The tube will be hitting towards the midpoint of the spinous process. These are all the 2 points. Major reason for you to encounter muscles inside the huge bulk of muscles inside your tube.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, you want to add up something with respect to?
Yeah, balancing everything. I think some of the cases we open one side of the wound during an MIS TLIF. You convert that into a semi-open sort of thing, so that in the end, if you see the stab incisions and the incisions all come together, and it's not a bad idea to make it a little larger single incision. You can feel and put the pedicle screws on one side. That's what we used to practice. Sometimes the angulation is also a little difficult. Yeah. Other than that, I think he has covered almost all the things in the MIS TLIF.
Anupa, doctor, I would like to add one more thing. Nowadays, I learned it from Dr. Ranjit. You'd be knowing from your place.
Yeah.
I learned it from Dr. Ranjit. I stopped using percutaneous pedicle screws because the normal conventional screws,
Yeah.
I use it through the tubes. Or if it is not possible, I use the Gelpi retractors and just retract it with the incision may go 0.5 or 1 centimeter more than the two percutaneous incision. So that insert the Gelpi retractors and we can visualize the pedicles, the transverse process, so that we can easily put our pedicles as we use in a Wiltshire approach.
Exactly. So that's what we also used to do, because rather than taking the trouble of putting 4 percutaneous pedicle screw, we used
because
to
cost is
on
a
one side.
Major problem what we face with these percutaneous pedicle screws. It is triple the price of the normal pedicle
screws. Only thing is that if you want to revise, at that point of time, you need to have 2 different sets.
That will be there.
That will be there. So
that will be
is another additional thing. You have to document everything properly. So that's one trouble. Otherwise, I mean, at any point of time, if somebody else is also revising, they will have all the 4. I mean, they will require to have all the systems in place before.
And one more thing, we have to make sure we don't use more than 2 systems. Nowadays, almost 10-20 systems are available in the market.
Now, that's one valid point that you said. You should, I mean, your staff, more than you, the staff.
Our staff should be used to it.
Used to the system. So
because if we are traveling along or whatever we do, we straightly land in an operating theater. If our staff doesn't know A or B of our instruments, our life will be fun on the whole day.
That will be miserable.
That was an important message you conveyed. So nowadays, MIS is getting because of the push by the implantologist also that it is the surgery. So, but it's not the thing. When proper open surgery is done with meticulous dissection, it's equivalent to doing an MIS as well. But yeah, still there has been advantages with compared to open. MIS is the most important thing which I feel is less blood loss and the amount of pain is also low.
And one more thing which I want to add up here is Ram, doing MIS surgery straight away is not a good idea. We have to do an open surgery for a long time. Then only we get that feel of anatomy and the neural relationship. Then we can slowly switch to MIS surgeries.
Yeah, if you see the patient on the first post-operative day, I think then you understand that all your efforts are worth, because the patient is moving, he is getting mobilized without much pain. So that is, I think, your rewarding moment, because all the pains that you take to put a percutaneous pedicle screw, the patient is off, but the very next day he is very comfortable to walk. So at that point of time, you understand that all the efforts that you have taken has not gone in vain. So that's one important thing. So if you routinely, and they go home much faster, it's, I mean, they are mobilized much faster rather than our own, maybe in selected cases we are doing. But still single level fixation, this MIS, they start to walk faster, I think.
Yeah, sir. And one more thing regarding the cost constraint also for the family as well as the patient, if they can easily go back to their regular routine.
Sure.
In open surgeries, the patient will be in home for a minimum period of 4 to 6 weeks. In MIS surgeries, they are going much early. For example, in 3 weeks' time. That means a 1 month salary of a breadwinner of a family is saved.
Exactly.
Sir, hello, sir.
Yeah.
Mohammed.
Yeah, can I share my initial experience in MIS?
Yeah, please.
Yes,
introduce yourself. Very small story.
Introduce yourself, please.
I am Mohammad Shuman Rana. I am assistant professor neurosurgery from Dhaka Medical College, Bangladesh.
Yes, sir.
Hi, sir.
Hi, sir.
Yes, I was working in a peripheral center. There was no too much facilities there. I was trying to do MIS TLIF, but after putting the case, before putting the screws, all on a sudden my C-arm was not working there then. And there was no way to put a screw there. So I just put the case a bit bigger size and put the patient like that. And after 2 to 3 months, I just kept the patient immobile. And after 3 months, patient was good. There was no symptom, but still the patient is doing good. What
Nice to
should
hear
I
that.
do?
The main take home message is we should not forget our open techniques.
Yeah, I think
Open freehand techniques.
I think you should graduate from the open techniques. You should get familiar with the anatomy. And as Dr. Pushparaj is also already told, the anatomy is a lot different when you first go in and land in the MIS steel. If you don't understand what structures are there, it is not the familiar lamina to facet look. So you land on the facet, you take a little while in understanding what is what. I think your open techniques and the open feel, everything you should not forget because it is our lifeline. Once the transpedicular approach fails, or if you have a trouble in getting into the pedicle, then any moment you can convert that into a little bit open, and it's not that difficult. I mean, the stab incision, you can palpate the transverse process, you can palpate the facet, and if you have the bone owl and all, I think I mean, open pedicle screw fixation, pedicle screw can be inserted through the stab incision also.
And to add one more point to Dr. Anup, MIS surgery is not fancy. MIS surgery doesn't straight away correlate with the size of the incision. It's about the muscle splitting, what we do in MIS spine surgery. In open spine surgery, we erase the muscles from the bone. That is the major difference between MIS and open surgery. We have to understand it very much. A lot of people feel that MIS means the incision has to be 2 centimeters above, 2 centimeters below. That can't be the same scenario in all our cases.
Yeah.
So there was a great talk and good discussions in this particular session. So I hope all participants enjoyed. Thanks for your wonderful presentations, Dr. Anup and Dr. Dinesh. Thanks.
Thank you,
Ram. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. Wishing you all a good night. It was fun with you all together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. Thank you, Dr. Mohan.
Thank you, Dr. Ram. Thank you, Dr. Dinesh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.